Welcome back to Skytech-Lens. North America's latest clash isn't about oil, it's about water. You can't drink oil or use it to grow food, but water is the lifeblood of everything. Which brings us to tonight's story. Trump demands Canada's water. Carney pushes back. US faces fallout. Tariffs threaten supply chain. Yes, the former president is now eyeing Canada's freshwater reserves, and this isn't just a hypothetical squabble. The auto industry in particular is incredibly thirsty, and former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has drawn a firm line. Canada's water is off limits. This is about more than turning on a tap. It's about treaties, industrial needs, and political posturing that could leave factories high and dry. So tonight, we're diving into this surprisingly complex issue, how the future of your car might depend less on steel and more on the level of the Great Lakes. Grab a glass of water while you still can. To understand why water is suddenly a strategic reserve, look at the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909, the agreement that's governed US-Canada water sharing for over a century. It worked in an era of steam power, but wasn't built for mega-droughts, climate change, or industries that consume water by the trillions of gallons. The International Joint Commission, meant to mediate disputes, is now gridlocked, unable to force action when one side refuses to play ball. Enter the Columbia River Treaty, a 1960s pact vital for hydropower in the Pacific Northwest. Canada gets paid for water storage that powers U.S. states like Washington and Oregon, but key provisions expire this year, and negotiations are frozen solid. The U.S., facing droughts and energy demands, wants more water for less money. They see Canada's moisture as a solution. Canada, meanwhile, sees water as a strategic advantage, vital for its own industries and increasingly valuable as climate change bites. The rhetoric is heating up. Trump's transactional approach, demanding water, threatening tariffs, turns a complex negotiation into economic blackmail. Canadian officials now face the threat that if they don't concede on water, their auto parts or lumber could face crippling tariffs. It's a high-stakes game of chicken, with the water supply of millions and trillions in trade at risk. If the Columbia River Treaty collapses, chaos could follow. Uncoordinated dam operations, floods, power shortages, a breakdown of a system that's provided stability for 60 years. And it's not just one river. The precedent could unravel water-sharing agreements all along the 500-mile border, affecting the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence, and countless rivers and aquifers. Every faucet, farm, and factory connected to these systems could be caught in the crossfire. The frozen talks are a flashing red warning light for North American stability. The old ways of managing water are failing, and the new political climate is hostile to cooperation. The stage is set for a conflict where the stakes aren't just economic, but existential. Because when the water runs out, everything stops. Why is the Columbia River such a big deal? It's a gigantic flowing power plant. Its dams generate a third of the Pacific Northwest's electricity. This cheap, reliable power is why companies like Boeing, Microsoft, and Amazon built massive operations there. Data centers, factories, and assembly plants all depend on this hydroelectricity, and on water for cooling and manufacturing. If the treaty governing the river collapses, and Canada holds back water, the lights could literally flicker in those factories. Power prices would skyrocket, and the business case for locating industry in the region would evaporate. Uncertainty is poison for business. Companies planning billion-dollar factories need to know their utility costs for decades. If power becomes unreliable or expensive due to a diplomatic spat, they'll move elsewhere, taking jobs and investment with them. It's not just about electricity. Factories themselves are incredibly thirsty. Take semiconductors. Manufacturing a single silicon wafer requires thousands of gallons of ultra-pure water. A large chip fab can use as much water as a small city, millions of gallons a day. With the US pushing to bring chip manufacturing home, more of these thirsty factories are being built, often in water-stressed states like Arizona and Texas. This creates direct competition for water between industry, agriculture, and cities. The push for technological independence is fueling a potential water conflict with Canada. A water shortage in Oregon or Washington could mean a chip shortage that delays everything from iPhones to Ford F-150s. The ripple effects are global and immediate. We've built a world that runs on silicon, but silicon runs on water, and that supply is increasingly precarious. The treaty uncertainties threaten America's industrial and technological ambitions. This is more than a disagreement over river flow. It's a battle for the foundational resources of 21st century industry. Now let's move east to the Great Lakes, 1/5 of the world's surface freshwater, and drinking water for over 40 million people in the US and Canada. The lakes are the backbone of a massive industrial corridor. Steel mills, chemical plants, and countless auto factories all depend on this reservoir. The health of this system is monitored by the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, a vital US-Canada pact, but funding for these monitoring programs is constantly under threat. Less monitoring means we're flying blind, unable to detect toxic spills or invasive species until it's too late. One visible consequence: harmful algal blooms, especially in Lake Erie, fueled by agricultural runoff and warming temperatures. In 2014, a massive bloom contaminated Toledo's water supply, forcing 500,000 people to stop using their taps for days. For factories, this means shutdowns and millions in lost production. Algal blooms are now a direct threat to industrial operations throughout the Great Lakes Basin. Canada sees the US proposing budget cuts for environmental protection and recurring toxic blooms, and gets nervous. Pollution doesn't stop at the border, it threatens Canadian cities, fisheries, and industries too. So when US politicians talk about diverting Great Lakes water to drought-stricken regions, Canada's answer is a firm, absolutely not. The Great Lakes Compact strictly prohibits large-scale water diversions, but political pressure to break it will only grow as scarcity worsens. The Great Lakes are a microcosm of the larger issue, a shared, priceless resource threatened by short-sighted cuts, environmental neglect, and growing scarcity. 40 million people and countless industries are sitting on an ecological and economic knife edge, hoping the agreements holding it all together don't snap. Let's talk about your car. It's not just steel and rubber, it's a product of water. Manufacturing a single vehicle can take tens of thousands of gallons of water. Every component, steel, tires, textiles, glass, plastics, has its own water story. Electronics, especially semiconductors, require ultra-pure water in vast quantities. The total water footprint of a modern car is astronomical, an invisible resource embedded in every vehicle. Automakers are acutely aware of this and are getting nervous about water security. They're in direct competition with agriculture, another massive water user. When drought hits, who gets priority, the farmer or the factory? In response, automakers are investing in water recycling and reuse technologies. Some advanced plants can now recycle over 90% of their water. But these upgrades are expensive, and even perfect recycling can't eliminate supply chain risks. A disruption anywhere along the chain, say a supplier in a water-stressed region, can halt production. Automakers now map water stress with the same urgency as shipping lanes. Water is no longer a cheap utility, it's a critical strategic input. The quiet struggle between farm and factory for every last drop is a defining feature of the modern industrial landscape. Against this backdrop, crumbling treaties, thirsty industries, and climate threats, Canada is making a strategic pivot. Mark Carney, former central banker, is now calling water Canada's most valuable asset. He's signaling that Canada intends to be a water superpower, and Ottawa's message is clear: our water is not for sale. This is a direct repudiation of transactional strong-arm diplomacy. The implications for the auto industry are massive. The supply chain is deeply integrated. Parts cross the border dozens of times before a car is finished. If the US responds to Canada's hard line by imposing tariffs, that system shatters overnight. North American-built cars become more expensive and less competitive globally. Canadian automakers are caught in the crossfire, protected long-term by water security, but terrified of short-term fallout. A trade war sparked by water could devastate businesses on both sides. Companies may be forced to rethink the entire North American auto supply chain, reshoring or nearshoring operations, or seeking new markets. The integrated model that defined the industry for decades could break apart, replaced by less efficient national industries. This would mean higher costs, fewer choices, and a less competitive North American auto sector. Canada's line in the sand is a high-stakes gamble, betting that securing water outweighs the risk of a trade war. For the auto industry and the continent, the fallout will be immense, reshaping the economic landscape for decades. So, where does this leave us? We're at a critical juncture, century-old handshakes meeting 21 century realities. Water is now a strategic asset that will determine industrial winners and losers. The era of scarcity management has begun, with the future of entire industries hanging in the balance. The decisions made now about treaties, tariffs, and technology will have consequences for generations. For the auto industry, this isn't just another supply chain headache, it's an existential threat. This is a conversation we all need to be part of because it affects our taps, our food, and our economy. So, what do you think? Does Carney's stance strengthen Canada's auto future, or put supply chains at risk? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more updates.